this has been one of the most amazing journeys I have ever undertaken. I've been doing spiritual journeys for quite some time, probably since about, well, in 1986 I had an experience where I died in my physical body and came back to life again. And from that time I had a journey of many, many dreams and continuous and perpetual dreams of expanding awareness that came to me. And this is going back to about 86. And in the year 94 I had another awakening, a great awakening. And I've been pursuing a spiritual path for a long time. I came in contact with Keylontic science in about 1998, or maybe a bit after that actually, on the internet, and I wondered what it was. And at that time I read it for a while, and I thought, this is an amazing understanding of the 15-dimensional physics. And so I sort of put it to one side. But it was in 2007 that I took up again an offer that came to me through an email to investigate some pre-ancient teachings, ancient being what we know in our history, and these teachings before our history that apparently are coming into the earth at this time. And I resonated with the feeling of that, and I started investigating it, and much to my beautiful joy and awakening, I pursued the practice of the techniques and the understanding of the technology. And I made it the most important thing that I could possibly do, was to understand the spiritual anatomy of our multi-dimensional form, and how we came into being, and what perpetuates life, and how does life flow, and why are we in a state of decay, and how can we regenerate ourselves, what are the timing cycles of the universe, and how does light and sound work. All of these things that came to me to ask the questions became my pathway to getting the answers that I really desired. And I must say that you also, when you realise that the multi-dimensional structure of your own anatomy and the correspondence and correlation with all life everywhere, and how the hologram fits together, how the hologram is created by crystalline structures and a network of support. I mean, for example, if you were to look at one atom and what science sees today as the atomic structure, you might see, a nucleus, you might see protons and neutrons, electrons, you might see many other things in subatomic particles they're discovering now. But even so, that atom that they see under the electron microscope or in other forms of observation is only a very minuscule part of the atom, the atomic structure. There is a much greater network and lattice work of support of a multi-dimensional expansion of that atom that supports that atom that we can see in this density. And when I realised that there are many, many particles just to one atom, and there's a crystalline structure that holds it in place, and that crystalline structure can also be manipulated by technology, that parts of our atomic structure have been taken away from us, put in different spin positions and elemental construction levels, that we are in a place where manipulation is happening on a very subatomic level within the very anatomy of our structure. When I understood how light works and refracts through the crystalline structure of a multi-leveled morphogenetic field, and how the particles of consciousness are so basic as perpetual motion generators, working in particle and antiparticle and antiparticle phases, and how they express in great diversity and form, coming forth through knowledge which is already held within the first particle. When I realised that, and that all things even now are held within the consciousness of the one cosmos, which is the expansion of that first particle, in which everything exists as living time matrices and flows of life that go and hold everything together by the one organisation, by the one law. When I realised that, I came to a point of saying to myself, I have to find out about this. I really have to find out about this, because this is far too amazing for me to comprehend in a finite mind. I've got to find other parts of my mind. And I realised that the other parts of my mind already know fully everything that is, because that's consciousness coming forth, and I've disconnected from those parts that already know everything. And they're held in different dimensional frequency bands, which are my actual consciousness. And I have had flashes of awakening and awareness and transporting into different realms and seeing many space-time continuums in my projections and in my dreams and in my awakening state as well. I've had many experiences that have led me to understand that what we know here in this earth realm is very limited indeed, and that there are far greater things to be understood and known and discovered and found again. So I pursued the course of understanding the multi-dimensional structure of the 15-dimensional physics and the science of creation and the morphogenetic field and the Partakai phasing, how phasing occurs as perpetual motion generators of light and sound, of electromagnetic, of contraction and expansion, vibration and oscillation, and the many other amazing attributes that are assigned to the functioning of one particle of consciousness, and how the particles of consciousness form what they call chelons or chelon grids that actually are the structure of the morphogenetic field, with different elemental constructions and different base pulse rhythm speeds of communication within themselves, and how the hologram is formed in a multi-dimensional network and maze of light and sound electrotonal frequencies in the very midst of this emerging consciousness, which is the God force or the life force coming into expression as everything that exists in space and time within the matrices of different densities of this universe, or the many harmonic universes that constitute the fullness of life that expresses everywhere. This life is coming forth from the very center of every atomic structure, and it's emerging as divergent energy fields. Great diversity, great myriad forms of expression coming forth in integration and communication with all life everywhere. And when I realized that that consciousness is energy and energy is consciousness, and that energy is intelligent, it carries information. Matter is an expression of consciousness, and it carries information and intelligence that communicates with other dimensional fields. And when I realized that everything is instantaneous, and that there's a unified field that communicates instantaneously beyond space and time, and it can appear in and through any time matrice, I realised that there's an amazing amount of understanding to be had by us down here suffering in ignorance of how we're created and how we can escape from the bondage of this space and time that we're limited by through the suppression of our mind. Through the suppression of our mind, we're being limited and locked into time. And it's all to do with the programming of the people who have programmed us, or the systems that have programmed us, through our own ignorance. And it's through ignorance that other infiltration can come in, because we're no longer expressing the true desires of the emerging consciousness that comes up through the matrices of the atomic structure of our very multidimensional anatomy. We are limiting the flow of life, and we're being programmed from the outside, and we've come into molecular compaction and contraction and density and darkness, and here we are living in this body which is very limited in its communication. So it's going to take a lot of unraveling and undoing, and a lot of exercises, and a lot of reprogramming and installing of the original consciousness radiation signature of our own individuated expression of life coming forth. And there are many, many parts of ourselves in density, stepped down into this density through many transduction sequences. And these many parts of ourselves we've been disconnected from also. But we can learn to communicate again into these many parts of ourselves and form our whole entity back into one reality as an individual expression of life that is in all the space-time continuums and densities, living and existing and able to migrate consciousness through densities and back into densities at will once we have full control of our mind. And so I think this is an amazing thing, and there's going to be a lot more teaching about the actual parts of consciousness and the structure and the flows of light and sound, how light and sound work together, and how the many different elemental structures create the communication on the different levels of frequency and vibration and oscillation and light and sound fields that bring forth all of the expressions in space and time, and how we can reconstitute ourselves to appreciate life fully, because at this moment we're suffering in ignorance of our true identity. And it's the time now to awaken to the truth and to decide what we're going to do, whether we're going to remain in a downward spiral or lift ourselves up.
Grant, Barlow, thank you so much.